Ay, it's a new world, gotta adapt to it. Innovation, information, more than the average. Rushing, please ignore the interruptions, cause this is digital discussions.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Digital Discussions. I have an amazing individual that I'm very excited for you guys to meet, John Sanei. John, you're a best-selling author. You're a future strategist. You are a student of so many different things. And, the more I get to know you, I'm just constantly inspired by the work that you're doing, man. So thank you so much for taking the time.
My absolute pleasure. Great to be here, dude. Nice to be chatting to you on this platform.
For sure. So for those who don't know you, I've actually shared some of your work with a lot of my closer friends because so much of we're aligned in a lot of ways. I think that we're spirit animals and we have a similar vibration. So I think whatever you're doing really resonates with me, and it helps me think about the future. Which I like to do, but it's rare you come across somebody who's basically spending their entire life thinking about it like yourself. So, I really want to take time today to explore, the post-COVID-19 world, how you think, how I think things are going to change, how the old system's not really going to work moving forward, and just kind of jam, man. Just have a good time.
Yeah. That's great. Well, look, I think what makes my work a little bit unique and different for other people that look at the future is that when I initially started looking at the future, I was really excited about categorizing and contextualizing it for organizations to understand the future better. And every time I went and presented to them, there was much excitement and much enthusiasm for the information. And I would go back 6 months later and pretty much nothing had changed. And so I started to realize that psychology needed to play a much deeper level in the education of the organizational structures in order for them to be able to make decisions that were more courageous. And so I started diving into psychology, and psychology took me into the world of neuroscience and quantum science. And really, when I started getting stuck into that, I started to realize that the depth of our future is very much dependent on the way we think. And the way we think is dependent on the stories we tell ourselves and the memories that we remember. Because the stories we remember and the memories that we have justify what's reasonable to us in the future.
Sure.
And so that combination of memories, stories, neuroscience, human psychology, futurism, business strategy now has become my ultimate fascination and connection with a golden thread. And I think people are enthused by it because I try and go a bit deeper than most other futurists or strategists, because I really want to get down to the point of how do I shift myself in order to prepare? How do I become agile? And my highest excitement is helping other people do that.
I love that. I mean, so much of, I think, what people are projecting for the future is based on history, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
So, and I think that this event, what we're going through right now, is so different that I think people automatically go back to saying, 2008, 9/11, all of these other events that we've lived through. And this one's different. Like this, I don't think this really has any similarity to 9/11, 2000. When you peel back the layers, right? When you get really into it, this is totally different. This is
look, it's a crisis of a magnitude that we haven't experienced. Those were all crises as well,
right?
But we don't have another point of reference, right? So we try and bring some sort of level of familiarity to another crisis, but this one's indefinitely changed our socio-economic system, whether we like it or not. It's an invisible force, an enemy that we have no idea what we're doing with. And these are the smartest people in the world. All 7.5 billion of us are totally confused on what's going on here.
Right.
And so for me, the thing that catches me so much is people are desperate to get back to the world that we were pre-COVID-19. And the truth is that most of humanity was anxious most of the time. Most of humanity Yeah.
I was going to say, and chasing, anxious because they're chasing a goal that they'll never actually meet, right? So, and I know that you talk about that, and I think this reset is very necessary for a lot of people. I know for myself that this is, allowing me to actually stop and look at everything in my life and actually focus on what I'm doing that makes sense, what I'm doing that worked for me in the past, and what I'm doing that makes no sense for me to carry forward in this new world. And, I think that that's something that I commend you on for talking so much about and shedding light on and opening my mind's eye to actually focus on, what do I want to be now, right? Like it's so much bigger than just thinking about like a business that I own and operate, being a father, being a husband, I mean, what's it all for? It actually takes you to a place that I've never been before, thinking about what, really how to operate in this new world. And you talked about the last time we spoke, you talked about the 14th century and the Black Death. And, that gave me a lot of perspective. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I think that's...
Yeah, sure. Look, the last time we had such a devastating process, and I'm not talking a number of deaths, because in fact, in the history of pandemics, we've had the lowest number of deaths. Because the first few pandemics that happened, people thought that was the gods punishing us. They didn't realize that was this microbial virus that was killing people. We didn't understand it. Within 2 weeks, we had understood kind of what it was right now. So, and as far as science is concerned, we're way advanced. But the effect it's having on us is as drastic because it's crumbling the world that we knew. Now, the last time something crumbled was post-14th century Black Death in Europe, where most of Europe was devastated. And that devastation in Europe brought about new ways of us doing agriculture, new ways of us sharing information more widely, and also saw the end of feudalism, their capitalism, only the wealthy, the super wealthy, and then poverty, right? It also saw the end of that and the birth of the flowering of the celebration of knowledge, art, and wisdom through the Italian Renaissance. And so here we are, where we are about to embark on a Renaissance. And so in order for us to go through a Renaissance, we have to ultimately burn the ships of where we came from. And this concept of burning the ships has evolved for me because, it's a well-known story where a general arrived for battle and there were more soldiers on land than any ships. So he, instead of retreating, told these soldiers to burn their ships and so that they go into battle with no opportunity to run away. And they won the battle, right? So for me is we almost like in a house. And if I bring it into today's terms is we're in a house and half of our house is burning and the other half of our house is in renovations. And so some people are trying to put the fire out and some people are following through with their renovations.
Right.
And so what I'm urging people to do is, look, let it burn. I know it's painful. There are going to be casualties. We're going to let go and lose a whole bunch of different things. But if you don't catalyze yourself to get ready for the Renaissance and for the new world that's coming, you're losing out on this fantastic opportunity of quality of time that is not only giving us an opportunity to spend more time with family, to reassess our lives, to reprioritize who we are and what we do, but to build something new based on this new Renaissance that's coming. And in order for us to be more valuable in this new world, we have to totally redesign how we service, what we think about as products and services, and what does it look like post. And that's just a beautiful time to be able to do that. And I think most people are desperate to get the economy going again. And I'm like, guys, I actually think let it settle, let it go away so that you can rethink of a new one.
Sure.
Don't forget that you were anxious and tired most of the time pre-COVID.
Absolutely. But it's all we know, right? Especially being based in New York, it's the grind. It's a very old structure and an old system that we're trained from very young on. Yeah. That you get up and get after it from as early as you can in the morning to as late as possible. And regardless of your actual accomplishments and success, we almost define success by how busy, stressed, and tired we are, right?
Yeah.
It's like Americans are so happy to and proud to say, oh, I worked so hard today. I have a migraine headache. I feel terrible. And, it's like, it's really an unhealthy way of operating. And I've noticed it for myself so much where, this has allowed me to, again, look within and focus on trying to make changes that are going to better myself and, most importantly, better other people, right? So a lot of people who follow me and what I do, they constantly say, Jay, thank you so much for the positivity, the motivational things, the things that are innovative and getting me thinking. And the reality is, and I tell them, I'm doing it for myself first. I use these platforms to remind myself and hold myself accountable. And if it helps one other person, that's gravy. I'm happy. That's awesome.
I think there's a great saying that says, if you want to learn something, read about it. If you want to understand something, write about it. But if you want to master something, teach it. And so when you put yourself in the position of sharing and wanting to share with people around you, not to position yourself as a master or a teacher, but to really get that to become part of your process of learning better. And so when I write a book, I often say to people, I don't learn to write, I write to learn. So as I commit myself to that writing process, so do I force myself to come into the process of researching, categorizing, contextualizing, integrating, and then to birth it. And that process, I upgrade myself. It's almost like I do a thesis every time I finish a book, because it's not only researching the book, it's about understanding the theory you want to bring across, and then how do you market it? How do you bring it across to people in a way that's not too brash, but actually in a helpful manner? So yes, it's a wonderful thing to help people and to teach people, but ultimately it's a gift to yourself.
Absolutely. I want to talk about a few different things while we're on here. First off, when COVID started to become more of a force, you were living in Dubai, right? You were on the beach and you basically made the game time decision to change everything real fast, put your stuff in storage, get rid of your apartment, move to your family's farm in South Africa, which is where you are now, correct?
That's right. Yeah.
And I'm the same way. Like I right when I really started to understand what was ahead of us, and my business partner thought I was absolutely insane, by the way. This is mid-February. I'm preparing for everything, and he thinks I'm insane. And as things started to happen, he's like, wow, I think you're actually a genius. How did you know this stuff was coming? So tell me about that, because I'll never forget your post in the airport. I mean, that was a very interesting moment for me, because it also, I already was aware of what was happening, but it took it to another level.
Yeah, good. Well, look, I was sitting on the beach. I was reading that Italy got closed down. I remember telling a friend of mine, Jasmine, next to me, I was like, did you see that 60 million people just got quarantined? Have you ever heard of anything like that? And she was like, no. I'm like, neither have I. I'm like, what do you mean Italy now? And then next thing it was Spain. You remember it was Spain. Yeah. And I thought, hang on a second, this has to start coming to Dubai. It's impossible for it not to. It had gone away from there's a flu in China to there's something coming.
Yep.
And I think what happens to us is many of us get stuck in denial and bargaining in the process of trying to accept something new. And you have people that are just more inherently personality-wise in accepting something new, almost wanting something new. Yeah. And I think maybe you and I have that sort of like, oh, something new. Okay, let me try something new, because I like preparing for something new. It's another problem to solve. And so within 3 hours of me reading Italy getting shut down, I gave up my apartment, put everything in storage, packed my bags, phoned my business manager, and I said, look, put me on the next flight out of Dubai back to South Africa, and got to the airport on the next night, Monday night, and I fly business, which because of all the traveling I do, I came into the business check-in area, and there was nobody. There was nobody and that's when I made the video. I was like, hang on a second. This is Dubai, the busiest airport in the world. There was nobody. There was like one cleaner, one person behind the counter, no customers, nothing. And so it dawned on me. I was like, this is real. It's now starting to impact. So I got back to South Africa, quarantined myself for 2 weeks, and then came up to my parents' farm, the family farm up at about 4 hours away from Johannesburg. And, my life has become from traveling around the world to picking lettuce at 12 o'clock so we can make a salad with my parents. And I'm spending some glorious time with my mom and dad, which I actually have never done. In fact, my whole life, I've never done so much spending time with my parents, and have become friends with them, which is the most fantastic thing, because, you have a duty as a son and a parent to check in and see how you're doing and have certain discussions at times, but, you're moving, you're busy. We have been chatting, and my dad's been telling me about his growing up and what had happened to him when he grew up, stories that I'd never heard before. And so it's become a wonderful gift. And also, I think, not more importantly, but as important, is that I've had to redesign my whole business, So I've been doing it sitting here on a farm and designing a business that I'm speaking to people all around the world, which has really also been fascinating in itself.
It's amazing. I've seen you also say that, this event alone has really had a major impact on your books, right? It's almost like anything that happened before this is almost no longer relevant, right?
Well, look, obviously the topic I write on is futurism and business strategy.
Yeah.
And so now all of a sudden you take this into account, futurism and business strategy are, those are the first things that have just toppled onto themselves, right? So I was a third of the way through my fourth book, and COVID happened, and I just decided that book was irrelevant. And so I've started writing a trilogy. I'm on the third book of the trilogy now, and really just moment by moment discoveries and connections of the emotional, societal changes that are happening, the business changes that need to start happening, the economic system that needs to change. Why are we following an economic system that's 80, 100 years old? Why are governments still prioritizing armies and going to war when right now all their armies and tanks aren't helping us in this war? And so, there's so many new things that are being birthed out of this. And I'm having a fantastic time just collating it, curating it, and writing it into these new 3 books, So, it's changed fundamentally.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the folks that are watching this are in commercial real estate,
yes,
primarily in the U.S. And, I'm very interested, obviously, on how everything is going to be impacted in the future. And, my company is a national advisory platform. We're based in New York Metro with 3 offices in New York and New Jersey. And we are set up really well right now, because the majority of the people that I speak to, if they're not moving out of New York City, they're considering it. And we have offices that surround New York. We have an office in New York City, but we have offices that surround New York City. So as people kind of spread out, leave Manhattan and go out into the suburbs surrounding Manhattan, and the housing market has boomed in a very short amount of time, because people have never been confined to a New York City apartment for this long ever in the history of living in New York City, as far as I know. So, it's really interesting, because those folks who are moving out of the city and staying in New York so they can have access to it, they're coming to us. But also the folks who are leaving New York City because they moved here from Indiana or Ohio or Charlotte, North Carolina, or Nashville, Tennessee, wherever it is, we service all of those markets too. And there's an uptick in activity in those markets as well. So you and I had a conversation about, exactly how and why that's going to continue. And obviously a lot of it's based around technology and access and so on and so forth. So tell me how your life is going to change moving forward. And I think that'll give an indication to people of what you're talking.
Yeah, great. So look, I think the longer we stay in lockdown, the more our habits will change. And I think that's the thing we must take into consideration first and foremost, because the more we are forced to build digital businesses that are not geographically needed, the more we will become entrenched in developing better solutions, more entertaining, more engaging services online.
Yeah.
The more we entrench ourselves into the digital world, the less important it is to be living on top of each other in shoebox apartments. It just makes obvious sense.
And paying premium, right? And having
premium living in a box. I mean, all of it premium, right? Restaurants premium, everything's premium because we squeezed on top of each other. when geography was important and timing was important, we needed to be at the office, we didn't want to travel so far, all of those made sense us to be packed together. Now we're starting to see the growth of something they're calling the third cities. And the third cities around the world are these cities that are being judged on 5 different merits. The first merit is, are you close to an airport, 45 minutes, no further, an international airport? Do you have nature around you? Because I think many people inside cities starve themselves of nature. And I think as human beings, we realize how important nature is more and more as we get older or as we reprioritize our health. Third thing is there good coffee? Which is amazing because this is such a big part of our lives, right? Universities, which bring youth and energy into a space, and nightlife, restaurants, theaters. And so now there's been a study to about 50 cities around the world that are these third cities, like Lausanne in Switzerland, Boulder, Colorado, Bergen in Norway, Bath in the UK. These are all cities that have these 5 things attached to them that are now looking a lot more attractive. They're cheaper to live in, there's more space, there's more nature, less traffic, and you're 45 minutes from an airport, and now you can do all your meetings on Zoom and you can do all your meetings on wherever else it may be, right? So if we just take that and we bank it, this is what's happening right now. Now let's add the smartness economy equation to what's going on. Now the smartness economy is very much indicative or the same as the electrification economy that happened at the turn of the 19th century, where if you wanted to improve anything in the 19th century, you added electricity to it, like a drill or a washing machine or an iron. Today, we will start adding artificial intelligence to everything. And as we start doing that, a phone becomes a smartphone and a car becomes an autonomous vehicle. Now you start adding those into the mix. And then you add another business model that's coming called the decentralized autonomous organization. And the decentralized autonomous organization was kind of brought about from a discussion that they looked at people dying in Japan, and they would be dead in their apartments for 2 years before anybody even realized. And the reason is that they're so efficient in their pension payouts and in their debit order processing. And the older people would just be like, nobody would notice they were gone. Maybe they didn't have families or whatever that was. But what they started saying is that this efficiency is going to be brought about by data science, machine learning, and blockchain. And if you could imagine yourself with somebody owning 8 taxis that were autonomous in their way of driving, they were smart and intelligent because of artificial intelligence. They knew who to pick up, when to pick them up, when to service themselves, when to get themselves washed, when to charge themselves. And let's say this person who owned these 5 taxis dies, those taxis keep running. Nobody even knows. Nobody even knows the guy died, right? Because they can just keep running now. So now take autonomous vehicles and take third cities, the reprioritization of our lives with digitization, with autonomous vehicles using the smartness economy and the decentralized organizational model. And now you see a very different reality coming up with where we choose to live. Now, one of the things I wrote about in my 3rd book, Foresight, was the unintended consequences of digitization. And one of the ones and examples that I used was the building process for the longest time would have us building buildings 3 floors high because we didn't have the elevator and staircases was the only way. And the times those buildings were being built, humans were working ridiculous hours in the Industrial Revolution. They were exhausted at the end of the day. And so the last thing you wanted to do was climb up stairs to get to your home. So what happened was the poorest people lived on the 3rd floor and the richest people lived on the ground floor. And then in the 1800s, Otis delivered the first braking system that created the world's first elevator, which initially had a driver and then became the world's first autonomous vehicle. And the world's first autonomous vehicle didn't travel this way, it traveled this way. And because it started to travel vertically, now all of a sudden, transportation to move 100 meters, 200 meters, 500 meters, 800 meters now in Dubai, the tallest building in the world, now became easy, cheap, almost free and autonomous. And what did it do? It changed the pricing of the properties on top the penthouses became the most popular and the most expensive. The property prices at the bottom became the cheapest. And so now if you apply the same methodology to autonomous vehicles, instead of moving vertically but moving horizontally, utilizing very cheap autonomous vehicles, utilizing the smartness economy, utilizing the reprioritization of what we value, and utilizing digitization of communication, now you start to see that properties obviously will start becoming cheaper in cities and more expensive away from the cities.
I mean, that's such an amazing concept and something that I've been thinking a lot about. And obviously since our last conversation, thinking even more about. But a lot of people will say, yes, but, there are plenty of people that are not moving out of New York City and anytime soon. And, still we'll go through, let's say, the bridge to the vaccination, right? Or treatment of some sort, and have that new normal essentially, and not be packed into a bar or a nightclub, which is basically what New York City thrives on, right? It's the pulse of the city. So how long is it going to take for these things to really impact our lives directly?
So look, I think you have early adopters, you have the middle, and you have the laggards. And that's always the scenario, no matter what you're talking about. So I think you'll have a process of it spreading out. What I'm saying is that if you are courageous enough and bold enough to watch the trend that's coming, this is obvious. It's just obvious over the next 5-10 years, Yeah. And also remember, when you don't have to go to work anymore, like your process of driving, walking, catching a bus, all of that also now changes. And so even if you are sitting in New York and living in New York, where are you going? To do what? Because you're just going to be on your computer most of the day. You're not actually walking out anymore. Now you're also scared of a virus that you don't know if it's mutated or not. And so for me, it just, the more you get to unpack it in your mind, the more you realize that what you are is addicted to familiarity. You're just addicted to the fact, well, New York was like this. Yes, I know it was like this. I've been to New York. I love New York. But to live on top of each other, when I get an opportunity that I can live near a forest and still do the same amount of work and be at an airport 45 minutes in, I'm an early adopter because that's just the way I'm designed. But many people don't want to let go of that, and that's okay as well. But remember that every time a new trend that comes up is initially unthinkable. Then it becomes radical. And then it becomes acceptable. Then it becomes sensible. And then it becomes popular. And then it becomes policy. So we are very much at the unthinkable still. So that's fine. And that's what my job is to try and help people just anchor themselves into a new possibility. And that, just like your partner did to you, that possibility grows and they go, oh, how'd you know that? It's like, well, look, this is the track.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, when I started walking around New York City with a videographer following me, almost 4 years ago, everybody thought I was insane. Am I doing it? Is it ego driven? Is it, am I no longer interested in commercial real estate? Am I creating video? What is the purpose behind it? Nobody got it, right? And now, fast forward, 4 years later, everybody's at home, invisible, and I was setting myself up for the future and using a term future-proof that you use, and really future-proofing myself, my business, and knowing that at a certain point, this is basically going to rule everybody's, this is the awareness and the attention, right? Yeah. So I just wanted to really create awareness and capture people's attention, and video and social media. I mean, there is no better way to do that. It's extremely inexpensive. There are no it knows no geography. It posts something, it's in Dubai as fast as it is a mile from you, right?
Look, I think the trick is realize that we want to build relationships with people and brands that we trust. And the way you build trust is twofold. One, over time, and two, when they're not selling to you. Because the minute somebody tries to sell to you too quickly, all of us we shut off, right? And the second thing is, the first time I see you adding value to my world, I'll be too busy to look at you. The second time I see you add value to my world, I'll take a small notice. Then I'll hear one of my friends talk about you. Then I'll read about you somewhere. Then I'll watch something. And all of a sudden, I'm surrounded by you just adding value to the world. And then people go, hang on, this is interesting. I like what he or she is saying. And slowly you get pulled in, but you never sell. And that's, I think, the biggest problem with social media is that people want to immediately sell. And I often say to them, look, you don't go into a nightclub and you build relationships. You start off small and you don't be brash about it. I think the brashness that society sometimes lets you get away with in social media, you can't get away with. And so I love that you did that. And I think that what that's done for you is built a level of trust. And then what do you get after trust? Influence. And then what do you get after influence? Business. So in the new world, personal branding online, building trust in a way that's gracious and elegant and really for the intention of helping, you actually become incredibly profitable from it.
Absolutely. It's you just described it really well. And it's amazing because I look at this as providing value with no expectations in return. And I feel very fortunate to have arrived at that place in my life. Because you do realize that money doesn't lead, it follows, right? It takes you a long time because when you're desperate and you're young and you really need money to pay your rent and, something you're working on dies, it's the end of the world. And, I feel like being able to operate and discover what you just described is almost a luxury. It's wisdom. It's really realizing, getting to a place in your life where, you're super comfortable in your own skin and you really want to provide value to other people. And I think also, what I've created in the social media world for myself is also, it's kind of a life resume where I used to compartmentalize, this is Jay at home, this is Jay at work, this is Jay doing this hobby. That's out the window. I'm just Jay, right? So I'm just myself. And I told you, I'm at a point in my life when I hit 40 years old, I really don't care if you have a problem with me showing that I have tattoos and don't want to do business with me as a result of that. That's cool because I don't want to do business with people that I don't.
Exactly.
I did a post yesterday. It was like, choose your clients as you would your friends.
Yeah.
And it's so true to me at this stage of my life. Yeah. And I think at this point, John, it's, that's people who want to do business with you want to understand what your purpose is, what drives you. I have a commercial real estate advisory firm, but I'm not in it to make money.
Yeah.
Hopefully, if I'm doing everything else properly, that will happen, right? But most importantly, I want to have an impact on the people that I meet, work with, and ultimately partner with on some level. And I want to be able to design their strategy and execute it in a way that it makes them, their company, their families, it just makes everybody better. It's that simple.
Yeah. Here's two things. One, and I said this to you when we spoke offline last time, was how you do one thing is how you do everything. And you are so meticulous I've been watching your stuff. You're so meticulous. And it's that same meticulousness that somebody who's awake and aware picks up on and says, well, if you're that meticulous there, you're going to be that meticulous there. So that's fantastic because that shows that you're not putting on a show. This is just how I operate, right? So that's the first thing. Second thing is, there's a line I wrote in my second book that starts off with, it says, are you running away from the darkness or are you running towards the light? And so what that says is that from the outside, when you watch somebody operating, they are moving, working, goal-orientated, energized, except one of them is energized by anxiousness and one of them is energized by excitement. And that fundamental difference is the difference between happy success and unhappy success. because you can still become successful and a billionaire, but be paranoid, anxious, and running away from something. And you can become averagely rich, but you're running towards excitement and you have a calm, elegant demeanor. And that's the real wealth that you want to be building towards. And the irony of it is, doesn't matter how much you make here, if you're excited, it's the excitement that keeps you moving. And the problem is no matter how much money you make here, you're unhappy. You're just unhappy because you just, you got $1 million and I need 2. You got 2 and I need 4. I got a Ferrari, now I need a Lambo. It's like, dude, it never ends. And I was there. I mean, my 20s, I was incredibly successful, but all I was trying to do was be not poor.
Right.
I was never trying to be rich. I was just trying to not to be poor.
Right.
And I think that our society, many people in our societies suffer from a lack of fatherhood. And I didn't have a father growing up. And from 8 years old, I became the man of the house. My mom and dad had a divorce. And I didn't realize how deeply I needed a recognition of a male person next to me. And because I never got it, I desperately looked for recognition. And how do we get recognition in the world now is money and girls and, those sort of things, right? And so I think the society is suffering very deeply from a lack of fatherhood. And you can see that with some presidents around the world, no names mentioned, but you can see that he's just suffering from a lack of recognition. That's all he's actually suffering from. His father never gave it to him. It's so glaringly obvious.
Right.
But so the success factor is obviously financial, and that's a wonderful thing to have. But deep down, are you building or you're running away? And I think at 40, you get this opportunity to ask yourself that question for the very first time.
Yeah.
And now that you get to answer it in a more conscious way, you settle into yourself.
Totally.
And so well done.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. It took what seems like a lifetime to actually arrive, at this place. But it's also about being pulled by something rather than being pushed, right? Because motivation only lasts so long. It has to be grit and drive and determination that's coming from a different place, right? So I don't think anybody can be truly successful unless they're pulled by what it is they're doing, right?
Yeah, so look, I wrote about that, and it was our friend Steve Uriah, when I was staying with him in New York, he said to me, when I run out of motivation, I depend on discipline. And I said to him, what do you mean? I thought they were the same thing. And he said, no, they're not. And so when I unpacked it with him, we came up with this idea that if you build or write down a to-be list rather than a to-do list, your to-be list gives you the discipline. A to-do list requires motivation. And so here's the thing, is that when your alarm clock goes off at 6 o'clock in the morning and you snooze it, you haven't decided who you want to be.
Wow.
And so the trick is to spend time designing the end result of where you want to end up. And that becomes the discipline factor that most successful people have. I've been watching, and I'm sure you have as well, the Michael Jordan story on Netflix.
Of course.
Dude, talk about a to-be list. I mean, talk about determination and discipline. There's no motivation there. Motivation's so like B class for him.
Totally.
And so his ability to visualize and understand what he wants to get changed the game. And I think that's what we all need to do, is put your to-do list down, create a to-be list, and let that pull you.
I love that so much. I think that, a lot of people, well, first off, if you don't have a plan, right? You don't have a plan, you don't have a strategy, and it's not very well thought out, how do you execute, right? Simple stuff. People plan certain things in their life, but they don't plan the biggest things, right? They don't plan where they would love to be, where they want to be as a human. Let's forget about most people plan in business. They don't plan in their personal life. Yeah. Where should their family be at these same increments of time, right? So I think that's something that I've learned so much about as well, because I look at my life in 4 buckets. It's called core 4 essentially. So it's mind, body, business, and relationships. And if you look at those 4 pillars, essentially, I look at them as buckets and I try to keep them as equally full as possible. And you can look at them as a table with 4 legs the same way, right? If a leg on a table gets a little too wobbly, what happens? It falls over. Right? So if you're not balanced on some level and putting a strategy and a plan in place and then reverse engineering, how to get there, right? You could do anything. You could be anything.
You can, because I think it's called first principles. Elon Musk uses it to build a rocket because he says, look, what do we need to get to Mars? We need a rocket that can go this far. So what do we need to do that? We need to test them. In order to test them, what do we need to do? We need to have a rocket that can be reused. Okay, if we need to reuse it, what material do we need to use? And then what material? You just work backwards. And so it's exactly the same as your life, right? And I like to design my to-be list based on my lifestyle. My lifestyle's first. So for me, I'm very, very keen on having a minimalist, luxurious lifestyle, meaning I want very little, but the very little that I have, I want the best of.
Love that.
Which means that it releases me of stuff. It gets me into a place of what are the things I prioritize and I can pack in 2 or 3 suitcases and move. And so that really became a very great determinant of what I invest in. I don't own any property because that just doesn't, I don't say it's a bad thing. It doesn't suit my lifestyle.
Right.
What does suit my lifestyle is shares. So I have a lot of shares and I have cash. And then that's it. That's kind of my idea of being flexible and adaptable. And then ultimately, if you take your business goal, and one of my business goals is to get onto a New York Times bestselling list as an author. And in order to do that, and think about it as an actor, right? What would an actor want? An actor would want an Oscar, right? Because that ultimately changes your career. It celebrates you as what you've done. And so in order to get onto a New York Times bestseller list, I need to do a couple things. One, the discipline to write a book every year, sometimes 2 books a year. Why? Because the discipline is obvious, needed to be able to play at that level because I need to be better. 2, I need to have a better research team around me, try and connect more invisible dots that other people can't see because you need more aha moments. 3, I need to publicize myself in New York and in the States and in LA so that I get known a bit better, so that when I do launch a book, there's some sort of traction. So what I'm trying to use as an example is my investment level, my patience level, my discipline, all changed when I started with the end in mind.
Right.
All of it changed.
Right.
So that's the trick.
How has do you have a routine that you tend to follow, a daily routine? And how has that changed now in this new world?
Well, look, I think what I always try and focus on is my emotional, mental, and physical health, no matter where I am. And even when I was traveling a lot, it was the same scenario. So I've been meditating for about 15 years. So I meditate between 45 and 2 hours a day. And I don't have kids. And so I understand that if you've got kids and you've got other priorities, that's sometimes not possible. But I don't. So I start every morning off with a meditation. And the meditation moves me into a journal. The journal moves me into a coffee. And the coffee moves me into a workout. And so what I've been able to do in the first 2-3 hours of my day is get myself into a state that is not stressed or anxious, is looking for possibilities and in a state of wholeness. And ultimately, if you wake up with a little bit of anxiousness and you wake up with a little tweak, by 11 a.m., you're having a terrible day. By 3 p.m., you want to shoot somebody. And by 6 p.m., you need 2 bottles of wine to say, oh my God, I've had the most stressful day. But it actually just started off in the morning and you didn't manage it. And the lack of fitness in your emotional state didn't get you to have a good day. And so even if I don't follow my routine now, and this is 15 years on, I can have it can tweak me, right?
Yeah.
So I always want to mix mental, emotional, and physical health before we start with the day. And I think those 3 things, meditation, journaling, and exercise, always put you in the right state. And I guess you have the same sort of routine because of the focus you have, the drive you have, the health and fitness you have. And that's kind of what you need to do to be able to access your best self.
Absolutely.
And I think that's key. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that, in closing, I don't want to take too much of your time and I appreciate it very much. I think it's very important for people, especially now. Fitness is so popular, right? People know that you need to work out and, if you want to look good and feel good, you need to work out. But I think people have not discovered mental health in the way mindfulness, I think that's really the next frontier. And I think right now, absolutely well-being. And, I think what's interesting is, COVID-19 is an accelerator of everything that was already happening incrementally. Yeah. And overnight, it's like, pour gasoline on it, throw some sticks of dynamite on it, and boom, here we are. And it's going to be very interesting. There's a lot of negativity, obviously, as a result of what's happening, a lot of death, a lot of terrible things, but there are some positive things that are coming out of this. Would you agree?
Well, look, I think with anything new being birthed, there will be the pain of the old dying. And that just goes with anything that's happening, whatever's going on in our lives, on whatever macro or micro level it is, any growth has pain attached to it. What I do think is that the reprioritization of what we deem to be successful will change. I was reading an article about the future of luxury. And what they were saying is that the super wealthy create 20% of the income stream for the luxury brands around the world. And 80% of the luxury income is brought about by middle to high income earners in the middle class, not super wealthy.
Right.
And those 80% are reprioritizing where they spend their money.
Sure.
And what the article was saying is that luxury is not a goal anymore. It's now the journey. And the journey to luxury is financial well-being, emotional well-being, and physical well-being. And so, as you said very rightly, these will prop up as becoming the most important things for us to start focusing on and really start to prioritize other aspects of our humanness. We've prioritized money and materialism for the longest time, but really we've never prioritized or seen the social capital of kindness or of fluidity or of elegance. And we've always thought of it as some Zen thing that's out there when you go and do it in India in an ashram. But ultimately the merge of the feminine consciousness and the masculine consciousness. And as it starts birthing, I think fluidity and elegance and a sort of maturing of us is going to come out of this. And I'm really excited to watch it happen. And I'm really saddened by the pain that's happening. I find it comedic, people trying to hold on to coal mines and the rest of the old way of doing things. But ultimately, they will die away. Their lack of efficiency will push them out of the business model that makes sense in the future. So, yeah, I think it's an exciting place to be. But we all have to hold on. There's no end in sight at the moment. And nobody actually knows when this is going to come out and what the repercussions are going to be. But we just have to hold tight for the moment, make sure our immunity system is as strong as possible, and prioritizing our family and loved ones and wait it out. The storm is still raging.
Absolutely. And last question, just for my own knowledge, what inning do you think we're in? If you had to say where we are in this process, are we still really early on as far as what we're going to go through, obviously, to come out the other end? Or are we halfway through? Just barometer, give me a little insight on that.
So when we talk about the end of pandemic, we must take into understanding there's two ends. There's the medical end and then there's a societal end. And both of those ends, for me, I think in the disease factor, we are halfway. I would think we're halfway. I think there's the last stat I read, there was 100 million scientists, doctors, biologists around the world trying to find a solution. So we have, and also all the pharmaceutical companies in the world obviously wanting to profit on it. They're also trying to find a solution. So if we think about it medically, I would think we're halfway. And I mean, I'm guesstimating, just trying to put a couple of things together. But societally, we've just started.
Yeah.
Because I think the repercussions, the domino effect of bankruptcies, the shifting of priorities of spending money, the old habits dying of going to nightclubs and restaurants, we have no idea. I don't even know what that's going to look like. Not that I'm a guru in any way, but I have no idea what the societal and socioeconomic systems are going to be looking like. Just governmentally, are the governments going to be around? Is this going to show up the house of cards that the economic system is built on? I mean, America just said another $3 trillion we're printing, and England said, just another $2. It's like, hang on a second, we're now in $40 trillion of debt. The world's in 180. What does this mean? Like, how ridiculous is this? So we still have a lot of questions to answer. And what I keep telling my clients and people I'm speaking to is stop looking for answers, start asking bigger questions.
I love that. That's the perfect way for us to end, John. John, tell everybody where they can find you, please.
Cool. My name is John Sanei. There are 7.5 billion people in the world. I am the only John Sanei. What a luck is that? And I've looked it up on Google and Facebook. So John Sanei on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. I'm always sharing, always enjoy engaging in conversation. So please join me on those and look forward to having me on there.
John, thank you for your good work, man. I really appreciate you. And thank you so much for taking the time today, man.
My absolute pleasure, Jay. Thank you, brother.
Of course. Stay well. We'll speak soon. Be
Ciao.
good, man. Take care.
Cause this is digital discussions.